I love my fellow Australians. I feel a sense of moral obligation to my fellow Australians. I feel a sense of functional obligation for the health and well-being and the strength of my fellow Australians' families, the health of their marriages, of their access to opportunity, in the pride and success of their children and their ability to fulfil their potential, whether they live next door to me, in the next suburb or in the next region. I feel it, and it was always reinforced in everything I was taught. It is not only a moral imperative, but it is an obligation and responsibility of citizenship. And I mean obligation in the most positive sense, in the sense that there is honour and value and correctness in having that responsibility. That's why it's said that seeking to shoulder that responsibility is also an incredibly fulfilling part of the human experience. Shared responsibility, care in common, love for one another is not a burden. It is a privilege that rewards both the giver and the receiver. It is not transactional, it is mutual. It carries with it a very clear notion that as fellow travellers on our roads, the word we matters. There is a powerful difference between I and we. But even then, the we is not a word that dissolves the individual. We is the meeting of individuals and choosing to work together. It implies freely given consent. It implies common purpose. It implies a common walk. For my Indigenous brothers and sisters, I choose we. I care for my Indigenous brothers and sisters because they are my fellow Australians. I care for them in a way that is impossible for me to care about the citizens of another land, however wonderful that other land might be. We are not foreigners to each other. We are one people. My future is tied to their success, and theirs is to mine. Our children's futures are tied to each other inseparably. We are not from different countries. We don't want to be from different countries. We don't want to act as if we are from different countries. And we don't want laws that make us live as if we are from separate countries. I choose we. The burdens Indigenous families have carried since the time of European settlement is beyond profound. Even profound is too light a word. Now, I suspect my school was different to others, but growing up in Leongatha, South Gippsland, in the 1970s, the history of local Aboriginal communities, their unique culture and care of habitat, clothing and foods and spiritual life were taught and received with interest. And yes, in the 1970s, we were taught about the atrocities too. It was not hidden, minimised or left out of the story of Australian history or development. It was there and it was in context. At settlement, it was a time of them and us. But we didn't want to remain there. It could not possibly have been healthy or progressive or constructive to leave the story there. Our curriculum chose we. I've learnt since that this was not the norm in 1970s education, but there it is. We celebrated Aboriginal life, history and modern day achievement. In our area at that time, we honestly idolised Yvonne Goolagong, Lionel Rose, Bennelong, Neville Bonner, not token admiration, not qualified by anything. And when we learned about it, we celebrated the 1967 referendum that made we official. I cannot tell you what pride we had that that referendum passed with a 97% yes vote. Only the power of we could deliver a referendum result like that. The power of equality before the law, the power of shared Australian identity and destiny, the power of walking together. The discarding of any disgusting sense that anyone should be treated differently on account of their race or colour of their skin. That was the stuff of bigots, and it didn't belong here and it would not be tolerated. I saw in my parents, dedicated Christians, both of them, a deep-rooted shame about the attitudes to Indigenous people that abounded in their own childhoods. Something they articulated very clearly, and a quiet anger and self-rebuke that they didn't use to describe any of their other beliefs. I saw them devote their lives to removing any practice of racism from society, whether casual, in crude jokes, exclusivism, manners and language, to the cultural, the racism of low expectations, the harmful partitioning and isolation of communities from each other, and to the formal, the harmful practices in law, education, work and regulation. My parents, and so many others of that generation, fought tooth and nail to move Australia forward together. That generation, Indigenous and native-born Australian, new Australian alike, they all chose we. They demanded we, they legislated we, they funded we, they cared and cultivated we. They started and shared that work and left it to us to complete it. This treaty would not be what they envisioned. I cannot support something that will institutionalise them and us, legalise them and us, culturally reinforce them and us, drive this state to live them and us. It is an anathema to every notion of reconciliation, equality and principle that I can conceive. It leads us nowhere but to being them and us. It will not work, it will not endure, it will not deliver the further change it asserts it will. It cannot. Now, none of this is to say that those supporting this law do so in bad faith. Far from it. I just disagree. I cannot move past the cognitive dissonance of a proposal that says in order to have reconciliation, we must be institutionally separated. I disagree we achieve unity by institutionalising separateness. I believe it will lead to perverse and unintended outcomes. I believe it undermines our liberal democracy. It removes the most important principle of equality before the law, equal treatment before the law, equal rights before the law, and equal accountability for our actions before the law. There are genuinely held democratic concerns at stake here. And while this treaty comes to Parliament as a bill, it is by any meaningful measure a constitutional change. It adds bodies to Parliament. It changes the lines of accountability. It challenges the primacy of the elected Parliament to another body, intentionally and yet wildly loosely. It empowers members of that body with rights members of Parliament themselves do not have. It is a body that has guaranteed funding in perpetuity with no cap to spending. It is exempt from parliamentary and public scrutiny itself. It has unique freedom of information exemptions and exempt from Public Service Act for hiring practices. Even IBAC will report to it, not to Parliament. It grants substantial powers over rules, procedures, oversight, but can determine its own composition and election processes. It operates via a private electoral, any counting system it chooses without limit. At any time, any particular group of Assembly members can alter the terms, conditions, extent, eligibility of the Assembly, and there is no VEC oversight of that. It is a law unto itself, without a single check and balance essential to any successful, enduring democratic process or body. It is inserted to nearly every stage of the Victorian legislative process with ill-defined explanation of process rigour, timescale and extent. It has the power to negotiate further treaties that will in turn bind other Victorians without say. All democratic processes demand transparency and scrutiny. This bill does the opposite. There is also no social licence for this constitutional change. A change of this scale and depth, and both sides have gone to lengths to agree that this is so, a change of this scale and depth should have been agreed by all Victorians. All Victorians should have had a say in this, and moreover, all Victorians should have been involved in the shaping of it and have a say in the changes that will affect them. It should have been a process of we. There should have been a bipartisan process. There should have been education and information to everyone in the state. Instead, the whole thing is being presented merely as a bill of Parliament pushed through on the numbers. The phase, the treaty era, has been used. Well, no one in Victoria voted for this, and few Victorians have any idea what it implies and who it will affect and how it will affect the functioning of the state. There has been insufficient discussion with the Victorian people, insufficient information, and yet it is demanded that regardless, we must support this unquestioningly, or else somehow we do not care or want for the best interests of Indigenous Australians. This is a cruel thing to assert, and those who assert it demean themselves. I know who I am, and I know what I believe, and I know where my heart lies. The idea that it is this or nothing is disingenuous, divisive assertion. It is not so. This bill is as much the government's admission of failure in the great Australian mission of equality, and throwing up your hands, you've come to this. It is not the right approach. Passion is natural in anything you care deeply about, but it is not evidence, and it does not grant moral authority. This process has leaned heavily on ideological notions of restorative justice, cultural safety and self-determination. Now, I think what merit they may have in some contexts, and they do, they have become lost here. They are far removed from their origins and weaponised to justify something that is extreme and divisive. It is not just a case of saying previous governments have failed, so we're trying something new. To suggest this trivialises what is happening. This is extreme. It is, by definition, divisive. It does not address past wrongs, and you cannot solve one injustice by imposing another. It is not the way to bring lasting change. There is a better way. The present government may have given up, but I don't think Victorians have. And given the choice, Victorians would prefer a process focused on outcomes, not new bureaucracies and rules paid at the price of equality and unity. It is not a price Indigenous Australians should have to pay for what is their right, because the loss of equality is a price paid by all. We want to walk together. This treaty says we can't. This treaty divides us. I cannot, in all conscience, support it. Now, this is a day of many long speeches, some forensic, some emotional, all tones, all beats, and I thank everyone who contributed on all sides. I see no point in relitigating or repeating things. I will be far less articulate and clear than others have already been. But I want to pay significant tribute to my colleague Melina Barth, who has worked hard with all communities on this and who has had to lead on a matter where emotions are high, and it is all too easy to forget the ability to disagree with respect. Ms Barth, on our behalf, has done so. And as Ms Barth said, it is not the challenge that is in dispute, it is the solution to those challenges we contest. And we contest in good faith, and we contest with better alternatives. Thank you.